Most people don't start businesses. They start activities and then run to file paperwork, hoping that the paperwork is going to save them. An idea doesn't protect you. A logo is not going to protect you. And filing an LLC isn't going to magically turn risk into safety. Today, I want to separate three things that people blend together and then wonder why everything collapses. And those three things are the business idea, the business entity, that LLC or corporation. And the third thing is the protection. Because if you don't understand the difference between the three, the idea, the entity, and the protection, then you're building on quicksand. Certainly not a solid business foundation. A business idea, well, that's just the intent. It's something you want to do, not something the law recognizes. Coaching, real estate, e-commerce, consulting, or even content creation. At the idea stage, when you're mulling it over about what to do and how to do it, nothing exists legally. There's no separation. There's no shield. It's just you. Three things blended together: the idea, the entity, and the protection. The only thing that's there is the idea. But here's the thing. The law doesn't punish ideas. It punishes behavior. And most people start behaving like a business before they're actually a legal business, before they've actually formed a legal business or entity. That's where the exposure starts. An entity is not protection. It's just a container, whether it's an LLC or a corporation. That's all it is. Think of it as an empty box or a legal wrapper that allows the business activity to exist separately if you respect the rules. The entity gives you a name, filing number, record with the state. We go there, look the name of your business up with the state. We're going to see it there. And that's it. That's all you get. Protection doesn't come from existence. Business exists. Secretary of State website says it does. But protection does not come from existence. Protection comes from structure, separation, and conduct. The LLCs and the corporations. The LLCs are flexible. Corporations are a little more rigid. There are certain requirements to maintaining protection afforded by the corporation. If you're shielded by the corporation, if that's the business entity you opted to form, then there are rigid requirements in order to maintain the existence of that protection, even create the protection. Because just having the box, the legal wrapper, does not create protection. And even though LLCs are flexible, while corporations are more rigid, neither saves a sloppy owner. People file first because they're scared. Scared of missing out, scared of being behind, scared someone might even steal their idea. But when you find yourself involved in litigation, the courts don't care when you filed. They care if you treated the business like it was a real business. And here's what I mean by that: that there was a separation between your personal expenses and your business expenses, clear roles for the members, officers, directors, depending upon whether you formed an LLC or a corporation, that the decisions were documented, and importantly, that any contracts entered into were done by the entity and not by you. Here's why that's important. If your behavior looks personal, your liability is going to stay personal. Limited liability is not automatic. It's earned, and you earn it by compliance. The protection is only going to work when the business stands on its own. Money is cleanly separated, decisions are documented, and you don't treat the entity like it's your personal pocket, because this is the part that many business owners are never made aware of until it's too late. and that is that limitations can be removed. Veils can be pierced. Maybe you've heard the phrase, piercing the corporate veil. That is where the court imposes the liability upon the business owner. The shield, the reason for setting up the business to maintain the separation between the personal assets and the business liabilities, that shield is taken away and the liability is imposed on the owner. That is known as piercing the corporate veil. So protection can collapse. It certainly can. Most people weren't running businesses. They were running personal income through a logo, same bank account, same credit card, same signature, signing contracts in a personal capacity in your personal name instead of signing in a representative capacity on behalf of the business. Same control. Those are examples of people running personal income through a logo. That may seem a bit extreme, but they're certainly not running it through the business. So the logo is the closest thing that I can ascribe to the business. If everything points back to you, the owner, the court doesn't need to work hard. It's very clear where the liability is going to fall. The real sequence behind business structure and limited liability protection is, first and foremost, we have to consciously think structure. How are we going to separate the business owner from the entity? Structure. That's the first in the sequence. Then choosing the right entity. It matters. Choosing the right entity matters. Separate behavior. And then, and only then, scaling the business. And eventually, real protection isn't about what you own. It's about what controls what. If this episode made you uncomfortable, good. That means that you're seeing the gap. Today, we're going to talk about why choosing the wrong entity costs more than choosing late. Welcome to the Prosapreneur Network. People ask the wrong question when starting a business. They ask, should I get an LLC or a corporation? When, in fact, the better question is, what am I about to expose myself to? That's the question that should be asked. Because an entity isn't about status, it's about risk management. Today, I'm going to explain why entity selection should follow 4 things. Not vibes, not YouTube comments, and not what your cousin did. Entity selection should follow anticipated risk, capital expectation, control needs, and longevity goals. If you don't line these up first, you don't get protection. All you're going to have is paperwork. Anticipated risk means asking, what could realistically go wrong if this business works? Risk isn't failure. Risk is success with exposure. Clients filing a lawsuit, contract going bad, money disputes, employees or contractors disputes, regulators, depending upon what type of business industry you're involved in, partners. All of those things carry risk. If your business can hurt people, lose money, or handle other people's assets, the risk increases fast. LLCs are flexible. That's a good thing. But flexibility also means courts look closely at how seriously you treated it. Corporations, on the other hand, they're very rigid. They force process. They create records, even when you're lazy. High-risk businesses don't fail because they choose an LLC. They fail because the structure didn't match the exposure. Capital expectations. Capital expectations means answering one honest question. Am I ever going to touch someone else's money? Loans, investors, partners, grants. It's important because the moment that outside money shows up, paperwork isn't optional anymore. It's mandatory. LLCs are great when the money is simple and internal. Corporations shine when the money gets complicated. In fact, corporations were built for tracking ownership, shares, voting, responsibilities. All of those things exist in the corporation. If you're thinking about raising money later, the entity choice today affects who controls the decisions, who owns what, and how any exits are going to work. Fixing the entity mistakes after the money arrives is expensive and messy. It's very important that we come to these conclusions up front. Control is not ownership. Most people confuse the two. Ownership means you have your name on something. Control means you decide how it moves. The LLCs often blend control and ownership together. The corporation, on the other hand, separates them. The separation can protect the founders when the partners disagree, when the investors apply pressure, or when family gets involved, or when exits happen. Someone dies, someone decides to no longer be a part of the business. If you don't plan control, the law is going to plan it for you. What are the longevity goals? What are the long-term goals? That's also important. Longevity means asking, do I want this business to outlive me or end when I stop? Short-term income can survive bad structure. Long-term businesses cannot. Corporations were built to live longer than people. LLCs can, but they require discipline and planning. If the goal is legacy, sale, or continuity, structure must support survival. So, the entity selection, whether you're going to form a corporation or an LLC, should follow the anticipated risk, capital expectations, control needs, and longevity goals. What could go wrong? Who else's money is going to show up? Who needs decision power? And how long does this need to be to survive? When you answer those, the entity choice becomes obvious. The problem isn't people choosing LLCs. The problem is they choose blind. Welcome to the Prosapreneur Network. Today, we're going to talk about what an EIN actually is. We're going to explore what it does, what it doesn't do, and why the courts really don't care. So welcome. An EIN stands for Employer Identification Number. It exists solely so that the IRS can track taxes. That's it. It helps the government know who owes what. Just like your Social Security number helps the IRS track you. An EIN helps the IRS track a business. It's not a legal wall. It doesn't separate liability, and it doesn't, by any means, impress judges. So, why do we think that? Why do some people think that the EIN protects? People believe this because the banks ask for the EINs. Banks use EINs for reporting, not for protection. When you open a business account, the bank is thinking about compliance. Courts, on the other hand, think about responsibility. Those are not the same thing. The courts actually look at your business. It doesn't ask for your EIN first. It wants to know who made the decision, whose money was used, who signed the contract, and who benefited. An EIN doesn't answer any of those questions. If you signed the contract personally, but paid with the business account, the EIN doesn't fix that. If money moves freely between you and the business, and an EIN is not going to clean it up. Courts follow the behavior, not the numbers. And misusing the EIN can create a lot of confusion. People mix personal and business activity, then point to the EIN like it explains everything away. They sign contracts personally. They say the EIN was used. They swipe the business card for personal expenses, but say it's my company. That behavior tells the courts that the business doesn't stand on its own. And when the business can't stand on its own, liability is not going to stop at the business. Now, here are the three things that are competing. We have the EIN, we have the business entity, and then we have structure. All of those things are competing. The EIN versus the entity versus structure. An EIN does one job. An entity creates the legal container, and the structure determines whether the container is going to hold. The EIN is for taxes. The entity is for recognition. The business is recognized as a formal legal entity. And structure, well, structure is for protection. You can have an EIN with no entity. You could have an entity with bad structure. And you can have both an EIN and an entity and still be exposed. You're going to still be exposed if there is not a conscious effort to put the proper structure in place. So what actually builds the protection? What actually creates the structure? Well, protection is going to come from separation. Separation of monies, separate decisions, and separate paperwork. When everything lines up under the business name, courts are going to respect the wall, the shield. It's going to be in place and in effect. An EIN only works inside that system. It doesn't replace the system. If your protection plan starts with an EIN, you don't have a plan. In the next episode, we're going to talk about how your personal name follows bad structure and why fixing it later is harder than fixing it early. Numbers don't protect people. Systems do. Thank you for joining the Prosapreneur Network, and we'll see you on the next episode.